Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth Series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Tuesday, July 19th. We're continuing our series of conversations with candidates who are running for statewide office in Vermont for the August 9th primary election. And today it's our pleasure to have with us in our virtual studio, Anya Tynio, who lives in West Charleston, Vermont, up in Northeast Kingdom, Orleans County to be precise. Where she works in management and is also the GOP committeewoman in Orleans County. She also, this is not her first time running for public office. She ran for Congress twice before in 2018 and 2020. Ms. Tynio, thank you very much for making the time available for this conversation, and welcome to the News Project.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate being here.
All right, well, we're glad to have you. We've been trying to talk to as many of the candidates running for all the various statewide offices as we can. I'll just start off with the same first question I've been asking everybody else pretty much. What prompted you to throw your hat in the ring this year in this electoral cycle?
The same thing that prompted me when I first started running. I do believe that I can make a difference in Washington for the state of Vermont, and I believe that Vermont deserves to be at the forefront of prosperity and have representation that reflects the life experience of the people that I would be representing.
Okay. And are there any issues in particular that you're emphasizing in your campaign? You know, a lot of people have talked about things like housing or Act 250 or, lower taxes or more services. I guess I'm just wondering what are some of the areas that you're focusing on as you, make your way towards the August 9th primary?
I think that there's a never-ending laundry list of issues that we could talk about these days for campaigns, and I'm sure all the other candidates would agree with me on that. But I would say that the first and foremost ones that I'm focusing on would be, number one, the economy and lowering the cost of living and the affordability and inflation problem that we're having in the state and our country. I would say that's definitely a number one, just because of the difficulty that it's placing upon the citizens. For me personally, constitutional rights is always at the top of my list. I'm very passionate about defending constitutional rights, especially Second Amendment, but all of them in general. And I also think that we can't leave out talking about border security and parental rights and the different difficulties that we're facing with our national security and foreign relations. So all of these are things that matter very much to me and I'm focusing on. But I would say economy would have to be number one, just because of the burden that it is right now.
So what would you like to see happen in terms of the economy or creating more affordability for the typical citizen? Is there some measure or measures that you would be supporting if you're successful and wind up in Congress come next year?
Yes, definitely. I think that first and foremost, we need to regulate government spending. We've spent ourselves into a situation of higher inflation. We need to reopen the Keystone Pipeline and become energy independent for our own oil. We need to do so in order to drive fuel prices down, which in turn will drive the cost of goods down. So all of those things will be something that I'm very interested in achieving. I would like to sit on budget and appropriations committees, the budget committee and the appropriations committees. People sometimes think they're one committee, they're not, to do just that. And I know that, in Congress, they kind of assign you committees, but if I had a chance to, I would definitely want to sit on either one of those committees.
I'm just wondering, the cost of gas, I know, is a big topic currently, but isn't the current price tag for a gallon of gas kind of been driven more by the COVID pandemic and the supply chain interruptions it brought? And then, of course, this year, the start of the war in Ukraine has had a big effect on fuel prices. I mean, what measures do you think Congress or the federal government could take to offset those, to get price back to price of gas down to what we remembered from a year or two ago?
Well, Well, I think that there are many factors that did play into it, but we have a policy currently that is not benefiting the American people. Day one in office, the Biden administration ended the Keystone Pipeline, and it's really prohibitive of drilling in America. We've dipped into our strategic reserve, which is a big mistake, in my opinion, national security-wise. And when I heard that we had sent that oil from our strategic reserve to China, and that is horrendous. The Biden administration actually sold strategic reserve oil from the United States to China when our citizens are paying over $4 a gallon for fuel is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And we need to be making wise decisions. And doing that at a time when we are struggling is the epitome of hypocrisy of taking care of the American people. And I will say that fuel prices were on the rise before Russia invaded Ukraine. It has exacerbated the issue worldwide, but it was not the cause of it.
You mentioned the Keystone Pipeline there a moment ago. My understanding of the Keystone Pipeline is that was designed to carry very heavy crude from Canada to Gulf ports in Texas and off the Gulf of Mexico for eventual export. I mean, it's Canadian oil. How does that benefit the United States in terms of driving down the price of gasoline?
I think that it benefits the United States more in the terms of the jobs of the oil industry. I would like to see our refineries reopened and our own drilling. That is a personal goal for me. I believe that we need to be drilling for our own oil and to be refining our own oil. We should be energy independent. We have the resources, and relying on foreign oil is a mistake for our country.
It was my impression anyway, and I could be wrong, that we were fairly close to energy independence as it was, and what little oil was coming in, let's say from Russia, we're no longer buying. But I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of discussion about how climate change is being driven by fossil fuels. Do you also support making more investments in renewable energy sources and electric vehicles, things like that, to eventually wean our dependence, to the extent we have it, on foreign oil or energy sources, and diminish that even further?
Well, I would say that the first and foremost thing that we have to realize about renewable energy is that we do not have a substantial way of utilizing that long term. We cannot store wind energy. We cannot store solar energy on the level that we can store, old-fashioned energy, if you will, but it's not even that. We need to do more work. As far as electric vehicles go, we do not actually have an electrical grid that can support everybody having an electric vehicle. And more work needs to be done. And it's unfortunate that we're punishing the American people for using fossil fuels when we do not have the options in place to replace them effectively at this time. I think that we're always needing to innovate. And to do more study and to work towards doing those things is always in our best interest, to always be moving forward. But we have to be careful that we're not moving forward at a pace that is outdistancing our ability to utilize it.
Well, moving on here, I guess you had mentioned at the start you had concerns about the Second Amendment and the Constitution. I wondered if you'd like to talk about that a little bit further. I mean, do you have, what concerns specifically do you have about, I guess, the Constitution and the Second Amendment? You feel that those rights are being eroded in some way?
I do. I do feel that. And we'll start with the First Amendment, and that is free speech, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. For quite some time, I am a Christian, and I believe that other Christians would agree with me on this, that Christians do face a certain amount of opposition to freedom of religion in this country, especially when it comes to the question of moral standing within their businesses and what they are and are not willing to do. That being said, freedom of speech, I don't think that anybody can argue, has been eroded online and social media and all of these places where it is really being hampered. And conservative voices are disproportionately affected by this. That being said, the Second Amendment is the key to protecting all of our constitutional freedoms, and it is why it was written. And it is a never-ending onslaught that comes from the political left to restrict gun ownership, legal gun ownership. And I would like to point to the shooting that just took place in Indiana. Tragically, 3 people died in that shooting. But the legally armed citizen that was sitting in that mall was able to stand up, engage the shooter, and end that threat by shooting him within minutes, long before the police were able to even arrive on the scene. And I think that that is a perfect example of what legal gun ownership can do for us. It is self-protection, it is the protection of others, and we need to preserve that right in this country.
But what if the person in that mall in Indianapolis wasn't able to get a gun in the first place, and nobody had died? I mean, wouldn't that have also been, I guess, part of the solution?
You're talking about the shooter. You're talking about the mass shooter.
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, criminals are always going to find a way to be weaponized. And because the definition of being a criminal is that they're not following the laws. So to think that we can put laws in place that against gun ownership and think that that will stop them from getting weapons is not feasible. It's not a realistic thought. And we need to not allow the criminal element to take away legal gun ownership, because then law-abiding citizens will be placed in unnecessary danger of the criminal element.
To the best of my knowledge, again, the last 3 or 4 incidents we've seen, one in Buffalo, in Uvalde, and Highland Park, Illinois, were all carried out by young men who had no previous criminal backgrounds. So
oftentimes they had juvenile records that had not been able to be seen once they had turned 18.
So wouldn't it have been also a good idea for there to have had more stronger, like red flag laws, I believe they're referred to, that would have identified these folks before they turned 18 and were able to buy a gun?
I think that we can definitely look at the option of unsealing juvenile records of somebody that has a history of violence and could cause, harm upon turning 18. And it is a problem that those records were sealed and weren't able to be looked at by a background check. That being said, red flag laws in general have a disproportionately high risk of being able to be utilized against somebody without due process. And that is my concern about red flag laws. We need to make sure that due process is always followed in these matters, and that we are not, again, restricting the constitutional rights of a law-abiding citizen.
Okay, I just wanted to also go back to something you said earlier at the beginning of this about you feel that free speech is being trampled or suppressed in this country. I find that interesting, particularly with social media. It seems like, if anything, quite the opposite is the case. There's more conversation, dialogue, a lot of it very uninformed, in my opinion, going out there. But certainly suppression of free speech doesn't seem to be part of the problem.
I think that it is definitely part of the problem that we're facing. Social media allows everyone to express their opinions, and that's the platform that they offer. It's not supposed to be considered hard news. It's not supposed to be, any of those things. It's supposed to be an opinion-based platform. The problem comes in where certain opinions are regulated above others. And I think that I will go for this example, the example of President Trump. Twitter chose to suspend the account of a sitting president of the United States when that president had been saying things to suppress the problem that they were facing that day. They chose to suspend his account. And I do believe that that falls under the category of suppression of speech. If you're going to allow everyone their opinion on your platform, that means that everyone's opinion should be heard equally.
All right. Well, we could have a long conversation just on that one subject alone. But so
I can go all day. We should probably cover other
maybe
topics.
maybe maybe we'll have another opportunity for it, because there's certainly a lot to that. But let me just, since our time is sort of limited, and there's several other areas I just wanted to hear your views on, and give our viewers a chance to hear them. I guess I'm just wondering, one of the big issues here in Vermont is attracting younger folks to either move here or stay here if they're from here. Do you have any thoughts on what should happen in the state, or what could be done that would encourage younger Vermonters, maybe some who are just leaving high school or college, or in their 30s or whatever, to stay here? What do you think we can do?
Well, I will say that as a young person who has chosen to stay in the state, the opportunity is very limited. Especially if you are leaving college and looking for a specific career, it just may not be available here, unfortunately. And I think that to combat that, we need to have a better business environment, encourage businesses to come to the state. We need better affordability, lower taxes. We need better education for our students, all things that young people with families are going to be looking at. Are my children going to be educated to the standard that I'm looking for? Am I going to be able to afford to buy a home? Am I going to be able to afford to live here comfortably and within my means? And unfortunately, we just don't have at this time in the state the business climate that is going to attract companies to the state and to offer those opportunities.
Do you think that businesses should be given like tax credits to entice them to open up shop here?
I do think that that's a very good option to begin with. It is going to be something that would have to be enacted through the governor and the state legislature, so I wouldn't have a great deal of say in how that would change in Washington, D.C. In Washington, what I would do is try and work with the governor's office and with the state legislature to see what kind of incentives could be offered to companies. And then I would go and I would try and to encourage those companies to come to the state and to bring their business and their employment opportunities to Vermont.
And one of the other issues I've often heard discussed is the competitiveness of rural towns and small cities. I mean, here in Vermont, we'll focus on, but it seems like this is an issue throughout the country, or at least in many parts of it, compared to urban areas. And I guess the parallel in Vermont would be Chittenden County. Do you think there should be special benefits extended to companies that might want to open up in, Orleans County, for instance, or Benton County, where I'm at the moment, to somehow, help those counties that are especially in need of having younger workers and workers in general?
I do think, as I said, that's something that the state would have to decide, but I do think that that would be a nice thing to look at, especially for rural communities that are really struggling to have employment and, those opportunities. I live in, or as you said, Orleans County, and we have like 4 factories that are pretty much the bulk of the employment opportunity in the state. And without those factories, I don't think that, honestly, we would be doing as well as we are, which isn't as well as I would like to see it. But we need to look at that. I would also like to focus on revitalizing agriculture and the forestry industry here as well. The forestry industry is doing a little better than agriculture, but we're losing agricultural land and the people that are farming at an alarming rate in the state. And it was a mainstay of our economy for a long time. And I do think that we need to move back towards that for that economic stability that it provided for many years.
And how would you go about helping revitalize the agricultural industry in Vermont? I mean, again, my understanding, and you've probably studied this a lot more closely than I have, is that basically it's a case where large agribusinesses in other parts of the country are able to produce milk for less than your average Vermont farmer can, with a herd of 100 or so cows. I mean, how do we right size that situation?
I'm so glad you asked. I would like to say that we need to focus, as we do on energy independence, we need to focus on being agriculturally independent. And what I mean by that is our food sources are sourced way more locally and from the United States. Import export is always, a nice thing to have going with other countries, but we shouldn't be reliant on them. We need to diversify in the way we produce food in the country. And I would like to see a more localized focus. So the Northeast is providing the Northeast's milk, the Midwest and the West, all of those things. And that may be a lofty goal, but it is something that we can work towards. And it is something that we can focus on and talk about with people about the importance of having localized food sources. And I don't think that's going to be a difficult conversation anymore based on the shortages that people have seen in their own grocery stores now because of the inability to truck the product from A to B. So I think that it's a very good time to have that conversation. It's a good time to talk about how the agriculture community supports the economy and what we can do to help those farmers to thrive. In Congress, one of the things I want to look at is changing the tax on inheritance of farmland and farm and ranch land. That's something that's very hindering to family that wants to pass the property down to their children or grandchildren. And a lot of times people wind up losing that property just based off that tax. So I would like to look at that and see what we can do to change that and to help young people get into agriculture. I know many that want to and just aren't able to.
Another issue, I guess, that again has national ramifications and of course is a hot topic here in Vermont is housing. You mentioned that earlier. I guess I just wondered, any particular thoughts on how we might go about that? I mean, the governor and his administration have invested or set aside a lot of their ARPA funds, I think over $100 million to help jumpstart some housing construction. Is there something beyond that, if you're elected to Congress, you'd like to see happen? Or do we just sort of hope that those ARPA investments eventually stimulate enough new housing development?
I think that's a multifaceted problem that we're facing. The first part, again, would be a state issue, and that is that Act 250 makes the cost of building extremely high. And we need to look at again, it would be a state thing, but it should be looked at how that can change. Because when you're paying that amount of money to build a building, it's very hard to build what's called affordable housing. You're going to be having to charge to just cover those costs. So I think that Act 250 has been a very negative impact on our housing market in the state. As far as on a federal level, I would like to go to the states that are doing very well with housing. They're building housing, they're being successful at it, and just kind of take a look at that model and see, how that could be utilized in the state of Vermont. And Vermont is different. We have a very rural lifestyle image that we wish to keep. We don't want skyscrapers going to the roof. But I think there's a lot of, within towns and cities, unutilized building space that we could look at right away to start converting into housing options.
Another issue that's come up frequently as I've talked to some of the other candidates, particularly ones running for Senate or Congress, is immigration. Everyone, of course, feels that, or it seems like everyone anyway, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, feels like, well, we need to, the current state is not satisfactory and we need to do something to improve it. What would be some of your thoughts on what we could do to enable legal immigration to go forward, and to the extent that we're having folks come in who are undocumented, deal with that part of it?
So there's a big difference between legal and illegal immigration. And I'm all for legal immigration. We're a country who were built upon immigrants. Everybody came here from somewhere else and they made their life in America. I think that being an American citizen is something that anybody who's coming to this country, to stay should be looking at. They should be wanting to be a citizen. They should want all of the benefits that citizenship provides. And that should be the path they're taking. illegal immigration that we have on this scale is to the point of a humanitarian and national security crisis, especially on our southern border. And it's very important that we secure our southern border because we have no way of vetting who is coming into this country. And unfortunately, our Border Patrol and ICE and Customs are so overwrought with trying to just handle the flow that is coming into the country that they're not able to look at everybody and see what they're bringing in, what kind of criminal past they might have, any of those things. I'm sure that a great deal of the people that are crossing the southern border are just looking for a better life, but they do need to do that through legal channels. This cannot continue. No country in the world allows their border to be wide open and everybody to come in without any type of restriction on that. That's not possible. In Congress, I will advocate to finish the border wall. I want to see the wall go up. We need that to not only help stop the flow of illegal immigration, but the drug trafficking that goes over the southern border. So I will advocate for the border wall. We need to stop the onslaught, and we need to be able to take the time to build that wall, go back, and start processing these people through legal channels.
In the minute and a half or so we have left, I just wanted to ask you a sort of a more broad-ranging philosophical question, perhaps.
Minute and a half for philosophy.
There's been much talk, and I'm sure will continue to be a lot about the polarization and political divisions we're seeing across the country. I guess I'm just wondering if you're elected and wind up serving in Congress, do you feel part of your job would be to listen to folks on the other side of the aisle and hear what they have to say and see if there's a compromise or some kind of agreement that can be made? Or do you feel that, the positions you've staked out in this conversation and on your website and elsewhere in your campaign are such that really there really isn't a compromise that you feel you're prepared to make?
I'll begin by saying that I've been misquoted on this quite often, that I'm unwilling to work with the political left. And I will clarify my statement on that is that I am willing to work with the political left, providing that the bills that they would basically need to join me in working on bills that benefit Vermont and benefit the United States of America. And I do not see that any of the bills that they have put forth recently do that. So I would not be supporting them on those bills. My job in Congress is to listen to my constituents and to legislate in their best interest and in the best interest of the United States of America. And that is what I promise to do. That is my vow, because I believe that when we swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States to uphold it, that is what we are supposed to do as politicians. So that is what I would do. And I will always focus on doing my very best for the state of Vermont and helping them to thrive and be prosperous and well represented.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there for now, unfortunately, but we may have another opportunity, I suppose, to
I hope so.
another conversation after August 9th. As all the viewers know, that's the date of the primary, but early voting is already underway, and you can call your town clerk and get a ballot and so forth and so on. Do your civic duty. But Anya Tynio, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Always to hear from all the candidates as to what they would like to do if elected. And, well, good luck out there on the campaign trail. And like I said, maybe we'll have another opportunity to continue this conversation in a few more weeks.
Thank you. I hope that we do, and I appreciate you having me. You have a wonderful day.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.